Hello, I am Muhammad Arfan. Here is my student ID. My student ID is 220170007. My research poster about a critical comparison of the carrier's duties and immunities under the Hague-Willeby Hamburg and Rotterdam rule. Analysis. In this case, Woolcaf versus CSAV 2019 AC 358, where Justice Stewart noted that the case have certain issues and technical loopholes that allowed the carrier to evade the ramification for damage and loss caused during carriage of goods overseas. The case was overturned on the ground that the contract in the Volcaf case did not provide for sufficient evidence to claim liability of the carrier and that there was no clear or explicit provision in the contract. The Hamburg rule have also failed such overturn in other jurisdictions, such as in the case MH Progress Line SA versus Orient Shipping Rotterdam BV and ORS 2011 EWHC 3083, common. The court ruled imposed a time constraint applicability of the Hamburg rule during the substitute delivery of a previously damaged cargo. The failure to comply with the time bar would have led to the carrier's negligence and liability to compensate for the cargo claim. For a Rotterdam rule, the related case in the US, that is Wimmer Sugares versus Y Resugares SA versus MV Skyraffer. The case also saw how the new rule forced an American shipper to pursue cargo claim against steamship line in foreign countries, which was financially infeasible and geopolitical ineffective. Most claims are often dissuaded and an liability regime is overhauled or transferred to the other party. Results indicate a general dissatisfaction for the Hague-Willeby, the Hamburg and fairly recent Rotterdam rule among maritime traders and maritime lawmakers, given the lack of harmonization and circumvention of its statutory article wide. Here is a discussion and are carrier duties and immunity different in their absoluteness across the judgment made on basis of the three rules. Contractual provision of the application of the provision of the three rules, such as the Hague Wisby or Hamburg rule, for instance, is necessary to avail an exemption, yet certain courts, such as that in Australia, have previously overturned decision on the burden of proof to disapprove the carrier liability. Carrier damage liability was thus regarded as faint, and an alternative negotiation was suggested for the Volcaf case as opposed to Hague-Wisby Article 3. This also raised concern over the carrier duties and immunities imposed by the Hamburg rule, which provides for a faint liability as opposed to the Hague-Wisby absolute and complete fault carrier liability for cargo damage loss. Both rule and the consideration in which the Volcaf decision was made provide insight regarding a lack of harmonization and uniformity of carrier duties concepts across multiple jurisdictions on the cargo carriage of goods, especially in terms of multimodal transport. And the other, how have these three rules been adopted across the various courts of the world, and do they share different interpretation? The rule fosters doctrine of relatively flexible liability except for Hague-Wisby, which impose a wide covering liability for goods damage and loss for trade overseas, land or by air multimodal transport. There exists much difference in the adequate understanding of the various legal terms and statutes used, owing to socio-culture and political, economical interpretation, but best suit the national context across all jurisdictions of the world. Concerning the peril of the sea or the act of God, the carrier duty consideration by courts are absolutely across all three rules. In all rules, there is variation in absoluteness of the burden of proof required to disprove carrier liability, as in Vulcaf. The judgment was imposed on ground that the owner of goods was not responsible for loss, but rather the carrier's negligence. Additionally, the Wimmer Sugars by Re Sugars S.A. versus M.V. Sky refer case dimensioned the carrier's immunity to liability imposed due to cargo loss damage beyond their control. While these rules have attempted to adapt to changing dynamic of international maritime trade, there exists much lack of clarity and applicability in terms of the complicated the rule application per the extent and period of carrier duties and addressing contemporary transport chains, procedure and system. Here is conclusion recommendation. The three rules Hague, Visby, Hamburg, and Rotterdam have been attempting to adopt to the changing maritime trade and geopolitical landscape, yet have been met with much resistance and controversy. Each set of rules has sought to balance between the carrier's right and duties as well as that of the cargo owner. Each rule differ in scope, application, and the sovereignty of carrier liability. Thus, the lack of harmonization and standardization indicate that the recent Rotterdam rule should be consideration in a manner that promotes interregional harmonization of various maritime decisions. Absolute and total liability of carriers should be re-evaluated and immunity should be granted meticulously by ensuring adequate contractual inclusion and evidence gathering across all stages of carriage of goods. I have submitted reference bibliography in separate page uh, and here is conceptual underpinning. Carriage goods across the sea had been governed historically by the Hague-Visby Rule HVR 1974. The Hague-Visby Rule 1974 succeeded the Hague Rule and 1924 have been historically a part of maritime law associated with the protection of goods